Welcome back to the podcast daily. Happy Tuesday to you. This is Bill Landis. That's Jeremy Birmingham. We're bringing the Ohio State Notre Dame rewatch to you a day later than we normally do. I hope that's okay. I hope you forgive us. It's a bye week. It's an off week. The Buckeyes don't play on Saturday. We're changing it up a little bit. It's fine. Ohio State's going to take off a little bit later on this week. We're allowed to change our schedule too, but we did not want to gloss over the Ohio State Notre Dame game. People are excited about this one. Burn, we got to tell them what we thought on a second viewing of the Buckeyes' thrilling 17-14 win in South Bend.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this schedule could also happen on like the Wisconsin week or Penn State week because these night games make it very difficult for me to get home and get things watched
Yeah.
and actually reflected upon the appropriate way. So rather than trying to do a half-assed rewatch like we did after the Western Kentucky game, maybe it makes more sense to take a day before we dive into it. Certainly appreciate you and Doug pinch hitting on Monday. People were not a fan of the fact that you said, Bill, that you had no dog in the fight. People want you to have a dog in the fight.
Well, I don't yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, I
Get
didn't
your
say I wanted
dog
them to
in
I
the
didn't say
fight.
I wanted them to lose. Like, I just wanna make sure I have the correct information when I come to the thing, when I go talking to the camera.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
I
fine
am
line to walk, like
Yeah,
it's a fine line to walk because we do like I think people hear that and assume that you like don't care about Ohio State, but you get to know these
I
people and these
very
coaches,
much care about Ohio State. I own a house
right?
because of Ohio State.
Like
You know
you
what I
get to
mean?
know but you get to know these players and these coaches on a personal level and like you do want their personal success, but like it's hard to you can't as an objective journalist who graduated from Penn State and grew up in Philadelphia, it's not like you have grown up your whole life bleeding scarlet and gray. So I think people sometimes get that, you know, in those like really tense moments, the really like down to the
Mhm.
wire games, people are needing you and I or Austin or whoever they're getting their media fix from to like empathize with where they are.
Totally get
Right.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
So I think that maybe, um, we just need to find a dog in the
I
fight.
have I have a dog. Um, I don't know if whether or not she's an Ohio State fan, but
It's
she
called
was.
your son. Your son's future depends on Ohio State's success.
Well,
So
he'll almost certainly be an Ohio State fan growing up here. I think that's inevitable, and that's fine. I hope he is. I hope the Buckeyes are good when he's throughout his entire life, like everyone else who watches this show, who have been fortunate enough to experience very little in the way of bad Ohio State seasons. So it's not a
100
bad
plus
team to be
years
a
of
fan of.
100 plus years of success will spoil a fan base, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I get that. I get that. I did not mean that to come off the wrong way. I just meant that like I try to bring a level headedness to the affair, regardless of what happens. In the actual game. But if people want me to get excited about the Bucks, like I thought it was an exciting game. It was cool to watch. When they scored that touchdown, I did exclaim loudly. I think I said like "woo" when they scored because it was
I
like, oh,
said
that was
I said, "Oh my god." I'm like, I couldn't believe that that was happening. It
yeah,
was so improbable for so many reasons that, like, being there on the field I mean, again, when we do the rewatch show, it's supposed to be about, like, taking the emotion out of it, of being on the field. I don't know if television, upon my rewatch, accurately reflected how incredibly physical this football game was, and like,
yes, yeah,
if I have one thing to take away from it, like, I have watched Ohio State players walk out of a locker room, 10 times, 12, 13 times a year for the last dozen years. I can not really remember many games where I watched them walk out of it looking the way they did on Saturday night. They were beaten to hell on Saturday night in that game, and Notre Dame's offensive line is as good as advertised. I know Michigan has won the Joe Moore Award the last 2 years. I know everyone's gonna sit here and say the announcers on NBC were, you know, stroking Notre Dame's ego the whole time out there, how good they are that good. That was a really, really good offensive line. And so I think going into the rewatch, I couldn't help but be impacted and have my thoughts on the rewatch affected by knowing exactly how physical that was at field level.
I mean, it did come across watching it live, not in the same way. You don't hear it the same way, obviously, that if you do, you're on the sideline. I felt it even more watching it the second time around, and then, like, it made me thankful on behalf of Ohio State that they don't have to play this week. Like, Notre Dame's gotta go play Duke, and, like, Duke's pretty good. That's a little could be a body blow game, I think, for them after how physical this Ohio State game was, and Ohio State gets the week off to kinda lick their wounds a little bit and rest and recover, and they probably need it. But it was among the more physical Ohio State games I feel like I've watched. Maybe it wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing, and it was certainly low scoring. But in terms of guys thumping on both sides of the ball, this was about as good as I've seen.
Yeah, it was. I said it in Snap Judgments that it was maybe one of the best bad games I've watched, and I don't mean bad in the terms of like football teams making a bunch of mistakes. I mean, until the very end, of course,
Mhm.
but as far as just it wasn't what you are expecting going into that game. I think that most people saw Ohio State and Notre Dame, two teams that were ranked in the top 10 offensively and defensively in the country, and only three teams that were in that category heading into the weekend. I think we all sort of were like, well, the offenses are going to be fine. We're going to find out if the defenses are for real. And we leave it sort of feeling the opposite, like, well, the
Yes.
defenses are for real. And now we got to find out if the offense is for real because while I have like a couple areas on the Ohio State offense where I am now more confident than I have been. There's also other ones where you have to take a step back because the offensive line was not good. With the, we'll go position by position like we have the last couple of weeks of the rewatch, but first blush, like by the time we get to that offensive line play, it may be a time to step away if you're not into you know graphic depictions of violence because it was not great.
All right, so let's start it then. Let's begin with the quarterback and Kyle McCord and his, I think, what will be a memorable 90-second performance there at the end of the game, but obviously it's more than that too. So, how did you come away from that game feeling about the quarterback play?
Like I know that Kyle McCord is not perfect, and I'm not expecting him to be perfect. So let's preface it by saying that there were
Mhm.
throws he got away with in this game, including one on the final drive of the game that should have ended the game if Notre Dame was able to catch it. That was a play where he locked down to Cade Stover and thought, I'm going to have to throw this quickly. Notre Dame at that point doing a lot of pressure, bringing the linebackers. They were doing that double A gap blitz that you talked about
Yep.
last week with Doug. Like that's a staple of what they do in that defense. And I think Kyle had it in his head, like, I got to speed this up. So he threw it a little faster. That said, the one thing that we saw out of Kyle McCord, and I saw it from the minute he walked onto the field at the stadium, and you could see it in his eyes when they zoomed in on TV. That kid did not have a single pressing issue going on in his mind the entire game. And I that is not taught. And you Doug mentioned it on the post game show. Like we've all been sort of looking for that defining trait, that special characteristic of Kyle McCord. It can almost seem apathetic at times, but it is not. It is entirely important for Ohio State to have a guy who is that even keeled be at quarterback because the game is going to take you high and low. And Kyle McCord didn't change from the first snap of the game. As you mentioned, like on Monday's show, like they wanted to go deep on the first play of the game. He ends up checking down to Mecca and they lose 3 yards. And you're like, geez, how do you start the game with a 3 yard loss on a passing down? They get a couple the next play on a run, and then he gets into rhythm. I really think Ohio State was going to score on the first drive of the game if they
Yep.
didn't get a stupid offensive line penalty, which seem is a staple of the show. Um, Generally speaking, I mean the last drive because the 3rd and 19 throw will be remembered in Ohio State history. We're talking like Troy Smith to Anthony Gonzalez 2005 at Michigan lore. If Ohio State goes on to win a national championship, obviously a lot of work to go to get there, but that throw will be etched into the history of Ohio
Yep.
State football. You don't find a better throw than that. So you can eliminate the concern about the throw that should have been intercepted because the you have a 3rd and 10 on that drive, you have a 4th and 7, you've got a 3rd and 19, and for a kid making his 5th career start, doing that at night at Notre Dame, an incredible atmosphere. Honestly, I mean, I've been fortunate to be on the field for a lot of these games. Like that was something, and the just the collected nature of his entire game. You can't help but feel better about where now. Don't expect him to be perfect. He's going to throw interceptions. He's going to have lessons that he learns along the way. But like that you have a gamer in Kyle McCord.
Yeah, that is the biggest takeaway for me, which is why, like, if I were giving him a grade, I would give him an A because, like, I don't care about the stuff that can get better. I care about did he get it done in crunch time, and he absolutely did.
Yeah,
He should have had a touchdown pass early in the game to Emeka Ibuka. That makes his stat line look a little better. His completion percentage gets thrown off a little bit because they were throwing the ball so much on that last drive. He was probably more efficient than that line would tell you. Again, he
yeah.
was not perfect. When the 2 times that he did throw the ball down the field, one to Emeka and one to Marvin, like, I think Marvin catches if he's healthy, and Emeka looked like he, like, tripped a little bit, and I think would have caught that slot fade too. Like, I thought both those are pretty well thrown balls, it just didn't connect. And he was pressured on, like, half of his dropbacks if you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, but I never felt like he was rattled, and I do think that is his thing. It's not getting taken out of his game, and he's a young quarterback who was going to make some mistakes, and I think you need to prepare yourself for that, I suppose. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay living in that world. Sam Hartman should have thrown 3 picks in this game too, and he's played
Yeah.
900 college football games. So, like, that stuff happens.
In his
I thought
world,
he
are defensive linemen. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
think if you add the touchdown that Emeka Ibuka drops, if you add in the completion that he threw to Marvin Harrison that was overturned for some
mhm,
reason, he's over 60%. He's at 280 yards and a touchdown. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna complain about that performance, from a in a micro fashion. Now, because of those incompletions, he's under 60%. You could say, "Oh, that's inefficient," but I just don't think it was. I mean, I he had, I mean, bad throws. There were a couple. The final drive of the game, he has Travion Henderson's leaking out where he could have hit him for a big gain. I think on the second play of
mhm.
that drive where he just put a little too much pepper on it. But like again, this is a kid making the fifth start of his life in a unbelievable stage, and he's not going to be physically perfect, but mentally and from a demeanor standpoint, he was as good as it can get.
Yep, yep, I agree. Not much more to add on quarterback, so let's move to, the running back position. Um, I thought this is, like, the 2nd game in a row, I think, where first blush, I was like, "Oh, Travion, like, had one really good play or 2," and then it was like, "I don't know about the rest of it," and then I, like, rewatched it, and I was like, "He was fine." Like, I thought it was a good game, decent game for the running backs. They did not get a ton of help from their offensive line.
No, and the game looks different if Travion doesn't trip over one person's, shoestring
Mhm,
tackle on the 4 minutes and 20 seconds to go from the 20-yard line. He adds a 20-yard touchdown run there if he just doesn't stumble. Before we started recording this, I was, touching up and rewatching a few things. That 3rd and 1 play that happened after that play, I watched it 70 times. I don't know how he didn't get a first down there. Like, I could not believe it. That he got hit by Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and I thought at first that maybe Javonte, like, grabbed the ball, and that's why Travion, like, spun his body. He had no, I mean, if I have one complaint, it's gonna be that play. Like,
yeah,
you
right.
have a straight ahead shot and you need 1 yard. Now, I think probably that ball should have been, like, reviewed and see where the spot was because I don't think it was, like, clear cut that he didn't land with the ball touching the 10-yard line, but regardless, the fact is that you have to get that yard. And he had, I don't care if you have to dive into the back of your offensive lineman. At that play, you had Luke Montgomery crashing down with Josh Simmons. Basically, Montgomery was riding Josh Simmons into the hole, but nobody blocked Javonte Jean-Baptiste. I mean, I don't know how on a 3rd and 1 you get nobody to block the defensive end. It's not like he was standing up at linebacker and you're just choosing. I mean, Cade Stover on playing tight end right in front of him goes and gets the linebacker. I see on the play why, but whose job is it to block the tight end or the defensive end? Like, somebody has to touch the guy. Touch the guy. Like,
Yeah.
is it is there a world where this is, Emeka Ibuka's in motion on that play? Is he supposed to chip? Is he supposed to block back down on the linebacker so that Cade can get the defensive end? Something had to have gone wrong there. But even though it did, like, Travion has to get that yard. All he had to do was jump into the pile to get it. And as soon as Javonte Jean-Baptiste hit him, he just fell down. And I could
Right.
not believe it.
There are a lot of things wrong with Ohio State in short yardage at the moment. I think one of them is a lack of urgency from the guys that have the ball in their hand. Because there was some of that against Indiana too. We're just like, you got to run harder. You got to run harder. You got to jump. You got to dive. You got to extend the ball. You got to do something. You can't just, like, get hit and go down. Like, getting that yard in those situations when everyone knows you're running is difficult. I'm not trying to make it sound easier than it actually is. But yeah, that was, I guess, mildly frustrating that he didn't make an extra effort to get to the line to gain there. But I thought he ran well otherwise, and obviously the 61-yard touchdown run was a game saver for Ohio
Yeah.
State, and he did break what he break 2 tackles on that run. It was really well blocked too. Funny how that works out.
And we've
So
talked about it a little bit at Roosters. Like when you
yeah,
do something that's a little different, give a little counteraction,
hmm
give him the chance to get out to the field side of things, give him space to actually set up a tackler one on one instead of having to a dance in the backfield. Like he's really good, and once he gets those jets turned on, like he is explosive.
yep,
But he has to get that running start again on the play right before the third down play that fell short. Like he was gone. It was a touchdown, and that one was well blocked. That was to the field side, so like or to the boundary side. So
hmm
it's not just the field side, but you got to give Trey Henderson a running start, and if you
space
give
and
him
yeah.
that, he is a real problem. Notre Dame, though, I mean, kudos to Riley Mills and the interior of their defensive line. They did a great job. Um, Chip Trainum didn't really get much room to go anywhere. Mayan Williams only had the one carry,
One carry. Yep.
and again, this is what you were just talking about. Like to me, that one carry for Mayan Williams, if you rewatch it, there's a cutback lane to the outside where he needs to get 1 yard, and you just have to get it.
hmm
Instead, he just went and up the back of his blocker and runs into three people. I just think that there's maybe a touch of I don't want to say lackadaisicalness, but it's like taking too too short a path to try to get where you need to go. Like like there are other ways, and I'm probably not saying that the right way, but it just seemed like there was a cutback lane. Even on that 3rd and 1 play where Javante's not blocked, like, I'm gonna trust Travion. If you see that and he's not blocked, you gotta get by one guy. You I hope you can get past Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Like, put a foot in the ground and go around him. Spin move, do something.
Right.
Like, there was room there if he gets a little creative, and there's not a lot of improvisation in the running game.
Receiver, what you think?
I think that a lot of people probably saw the injury to Marvin Harrison and said, "Oh my lord, I can't believe this is happening again,"
Mhm.
because it looked really, really bad
I was
on
one of
the
those
field.
people. Yeah.
On the field, I did not get to see what happened because I was trying to track Travion with my camera, and then he scores and is in the end zone, and I'm panning backward, and I see Marvin laying on the ground, like splayed out on his stomach, helmet off. I'm like, "What the hell happened here? Did he get like just dusted by someone?" And the fact that like he must have taken off his helmet to scream in pain or something, because that's very rare for an ankle injury to lead to that sort of result, or a leg injury to lead to that sort of like image afterward without it being something extremely serious. Um, yeah, I thought Notre Dame did a nice job on him, much like Indiana did, putting 2 or 3 guys on him every play.
Yep.
Now, that's what's going to happen. Ohio State knows that. Emeka Ibuka had a big day. I'd like to see Ohio State find a way to get Julian Fleming involved a little bit more instead of constantly focus on Emeka Ibuka, because it's you can bracket 2 guys if you really want to. And I think more teams will realize that you may need to do that with Marvin and Emeka and force Julian Fleming to beat you. But I thought they continued to block well. Receivers blocked well. I like that. They made the big plays down the stretch. Obviously, the drop by Emeka for in the end zone is rare. But as I mentioned on the Rooster show, like that's a play that could screw with you the rest of the day, and he's like a professional and didn't let it bother him. So I'm into that. Overall, they had what 5, 6 guys with catches, 7 guys with catches, 6 guys with catches.
Yeah.
7 for Emeka, 7 for Cade, and I don't know. I think you can find a way to do other things. Chip Trainum gets the one big one. There were multiple attempts to throw the ball to Travion Henderson in the fourth quarter in the final 2 drives, but like I think you can do that earlier. Like
Mhm.
there's no if especially on if Ohio State's going to take those deep shots on first down, which they did a lot in this game, which I appreciated, instead of running into the middle of the defensive line on second down, maybe that's where you try the screen pass. Maybe that's where you try to get the receiver out or the running back out in the flat on swing pass or something like that, because the running straight into the center of the defense doesn't seem to work.
No, they were very ineffective on those second down runs. I pointed that out on the Monday show with Doug. Yeah, I thought the receivers were good. It's funny, like, I don't treat Pro Football Focus grades as gospel in the slightest, but I think they're a reasonable way a reasonable tool to impact your analysis. The 3 best run blocking grades for Ohio State in this game were the 3 receivers. So, that's interesting. That's good for them. Tough day for Marvin with all the bodies getting thrown his way. I thought Emeka was great. I likewise would like to see Julian Fleming or someone else get a little more involved in that, just like
Yeah.
a third receiver, like whoever that is. Doesn't necessarily have to be Julian, but I do think you're right. I think there are ways for defenses to try to scheme to take Marvin and Emeka away. And when that happens, then what's Ohio State's counter to that? I don't know, but to see Emeka in particular kind of like step up and fill the void in a way that did not happen against Indiana when Indiana did a lot to take Marvin away. Now, part of that's game plan. I think they were more intentional about targeting Emeka in this game, but aside from the drop, he was great. And like that catch, when talking about the throw on 3rd and 19, like that's a tough catch to make too. There were
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
defenders closing on him, and like you gotta catch it. Like you gotta kind of cut it with his body just to make sure that he got it. And then I think was anticipating getting crushed on that play. And luckily for him, that didn't happen. But that's a tough catch.
Yeah, I mean, and then you look at Marv's stat line. I mean, 3 catches, 32 yards, but if you add the 33-yarder that shouldn't have been overturned, it's
Yep.
4 for 66. He drew 2 pass interference penalties. Like, he's doing the things he has to do, but he made the big diving catch on the final drive of the game to move the Buckeyes into the red zone. And the fact that he came back out there after that injury, when even if it's not like a serious season long thing, he could have easily powered down for the day and said, hey, you know what, it's not worth it. Him being back out there in that third and fourth quarter allowed Emeka Ibuka to continue to be left
Absolutely.
open.
Yeah.
And like, you have to give a ton of credit to him for doing that. And Marv in the Peach Bowl was adamant that he was able to go back out on the field and give it a go. Ohio State didn't want to risk that because it was a concussion slash headshot. And this is a little different. He walked out of the tent and he looked like his leg was taped from toe to knee. But he was ready to go. Walked around pretty gingerly after talking to people on Tuesday that were around the wood. He said he seemed to be fairly normal. So for future reference, I think people would be glad to hear that. But it's a good receivers group. I'd love to see them find a way to get Carnell Tate more involved,
Yep.
because I think he's a difference maker and can be. Again, Julian Fleming does so many little things well that, like, you don't want to risk taking him off the field when he's one of your best blockers. But
Mhm.
and blocking is such an issue for everyone else. But I think you're going to need to find an additional true weapon in the passing game, because it's pretty obvious that you can shut down both of those guys if you put 2 on them all day.
I thought this would be a move Marv around more game, and it really wasn't. He played eight snaps out of the slot. It was a move a Mecca around kind of game. Interestingly enough, they had a few plays where they motioned him through the backfield. Obviously, gave him the 2 handoffs. One worked, one didn't. They ran a play it might have been the first drive of the game. It was one of the early third downs. They ran the mesh play, right? Staple Ryan Day pass concept where the running back runs a wheel route out of the backfield. Mecca was the running back, and Travion Henderson was out wide. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder, if we'll see more of that. That was if I was anticipating them doing some of the like quote unquote Jackson Smith and Jigba stuff with Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. They have not yet, really, but they were doing some of it with Mecca against Notre Dame, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's more like a Debo Samuel stuff I think they're trying to do with Mac, but like, either way, he's talented and versatile. So get him out
Mhm.
there as much as you can, except on punt return.
Yep. Tight ends, I think it's probably a similar thought process, right? Good receiving game, leaving a little something to be desired in the blocking game. Although this might have been Kate Stover's best blocking game.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, there was the one clip flying around on Twitter on Tuesday. I'm sure you saw it on the catch he had, like the 3-yard completion he had in the fourth quarter on the final drive of the game, where he chipped a guy and
mhm.
basically almost like chipped him right into Donovan Jackson's legs and almost took Donovan out. But when Cade gets his hands on you, he's a super physical dude and he's gonna leave a mark. But he's just been very inconsistent getting his hands on people, and um, I don't know what that's all about, but yeah, I mean, he's such a versatile weapon in the passing game. Almost, I think, to the detriment of Kyle McCord sometimes because he tries to force it to Cade when maybe he shouldn't
He does, yes.
do that.
I agree with
But
that.
I think when you get comfortable with a guy, you're like, okay, I know I can trust him. He's gonna give me at least the best effort he can. Um, but sometimes I think, especially in the red zone, you might see it a little too much. But I'm not going to complain about them.
Yeah, G. Scott, who had been playing well, got, like, run over a couple times in this game, including on the final touchdown. No harm there, I suppose, but, he was asked to probably do more inline blocking than I think G. Scott should be asked to do.
Yeah,
I like him better in space than I do Cade, and I like Cade more in line than I like anybody else in the tight end room. Saw a little bit of Joe Royer.
yeah,
It was a fun.
he was the
Yeah,
target on that 4th and 1 play at the
yeah,
in the
slipped.
2nd quarter. Just got slipped or knocked down or whatever, and that was supposed to be, I think, like a tight end throwback that Notre
Mhm.
Dame did a good job seemingly having it covered anyway. But him and Chip Training were both supposed to be off on that left side, and I think that it just got blown up. So, but again, I think things like that are getting blown up, Bill, because it's predictable. Like, and
Notre Dame certainly had a pretty good handle on the times that Ohio State was either going to try to hit them over the top or draw up something that would lead to an explosive play. Like every time Ohio State tried to do it, it didn't work.
yeah, I think from just a coaching perspective, one of the subscribers on the text thread on the text message board, subtext, um, mentioned something about wanting Ryan Day to be made aware of the fact that he should cover his mouth when he's calling plays, like put your play sheet up to your mouth. Do you
Oh,
think that? Like, I don't know if it's something that people actually watch, but I have noticed he doesn't do it, and I know a lot of other coaches
huh.
do.
Yeah.
Uh,
There was one last week, like you heard the full play call on TV for, for one of
yeah,
them.
like
The
I'm
Fox microphone
wondering.
was like right there. Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's something that Ohio State needs to be like, "Hey, by the way, cover this up," because
Mouth,
peop
yeah.
whatever.
He also
Offensive line,
speaks in a way. I think he speaks in a way that makes it easy to read his lips because, like, there are a lot of times where I'm watching, I was like, I know exactly what he said.
yeah,
Like,
he
I can't.
enunciates very well.
Yeah.
Like,
Last thing.
when he says to Josh Fryer, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
For example.
Before we get the offensive line, I just want to throw the stat out there for tight ends because I was rewatching the game. I was uh, curious about it, so I went to look it up. Cade Stover is fourth in the country, I believe, in yards after the catch for tight ends right now.
I mean, he is the, like, the definition or the example of when you think of Chris Berman and the old rumbling, stumbling, bumbling,
Yes. Yep.
that is Cade Stover. He should that is the soundtrack to Cade Stover's life. Um, Offensive line, Bill.
O line. What
Let's
do you
just
got?
start with the good, okay? We know they're doing a nice job in pass pro, okay?
Mhm.
Notre Dame did a lot of things. They put a lot of pressure on McCord from a lot of different angles. Did not get sacked, so that's good. Um, that's it for the offensive line.
It
Uh,
was yes. I would say that like, I was unsure of how they would play there. I was nervous of how they would play there. I think it probably looked more or less how I anticipated it to look, which is not all that great. But there were a handful of times where it looked really good, and I think Ohio State maximized those times, which is good for Ohio State to do. But very clearly a work in progress for the offensive line, especially when it comes to running the ball. Just like they're not sustaining blocks well enough right now. They're like the guy gets to the line of scrimmage, and then a linebacker who should be covered up just disengages from his block far too easily, and that's the guy who makes the tackle. And I feel like that happened a lot against Notre Dame.
yeah, I just it is a group that, and this is not a this year problem. This is a last couple year problem. That the Ohio State offensive line gets penalties in the absolute worst instances all the time. I mean, there's never a good time for a penalty, but procedure penalties, dumb holding penalties. I do not, upon rewatching it, I don't think that Josh Fryer should have been penalized for that play that cost Ohio
The
State.
roughing,
Yeah, I just don't
yeah.
think that should be roughing. I'm sorry, the play is still going on. The quarterback is a yard away from the guy on the ground. I have no problem with Josh Fryer making sure that block is finished by making sure that guy can't get up and sack his quarterback. Like, I do not think that should be a penalty. Um, it is whatever. It's a dumb
I
penalty.
think it was more maybe that he hit him, like, to the in the head than it was that he hit him at all,
Yeah, I
would be
mean,
my
I,
guess.
I
Because
don't.
I agree with you generally, I don't think that should be a penalty as long as he doesn't hit him in the noggin.
Yeah, I guess if that's what I didn't look at it that close. I'm looking at just I thought they called it because he just jumped on the guy that was on the ground.
Yeah, that
And
happens. That happens a lot. Yeah.
if I again, you're a yard away from my quarterback, I'm gonna make sure you don't get up.
Yep.
Um, that penalty cost I mean, that penalty changed the game. So, I think that you look at that, but, later in the game, he came back and they played well. They got Kyle the time he needed, down the stretch, and, kudos to Kyle for a couple times when Notre Dame did have him in the grasp where he was able to muscle his way out of things. Um, it's a line that needs some work. Maryland is not going to, you know, be a huge threat at the point of attack, but there are games coming when you're gonna need to be way, way better, and, I'm
Yeah.
trying not to be overly critical of a group that's played 4 games together, and I know it takes time for offensive lines to gel, but man, it is rough sledding out there, and it is a testament, Bill, in my opinion, to the talent of Ohio State that when they that 5-7% of the time when everything does go well on a play, they score a touchdown, like, nearly every time.
Yeah.
So, you've got to figure out a way to get that 5 to 7% to 20 to 25% in the next couple weeks. It's been just way too inconsistent.
Yeah, I thought it was a tough game for Carson Hinsman. I think just like handling a lot of new stuff. It didn't make me nervous about his ability to do the job moving forward. I think it was a little bit of trial by fire, and hopefully he gets better from that. I do like the thing that I find most frustrating with the offensive line is like the guard play, it just like is not as good as I thought it was going to be. And is that like a byproduct of having new guys on either side of you and you got to do a lot and you're thinking a lot? I don't know. I want to make sure I'm being fair when I say that, but I thought at least they'd be solid and reliable at that position. And I just feel like too often they haven't been. It's almost like you watch the five and all five kind of look like they're playing for the first time, and it shouldn't feel that way. Maybe it's Matthew Jones a little less than Donovan Jackson, but I think like there are times where Donovan Jackson I think really struggles,
Yeah.
and he's not quite made the step that I thought he would make, and maybe my read on his ability to do so was wrong in the first place, and that would be me being wrong. But um, I don't think they're getting a lot of help from the more veteran guys on this line who should be able to shore things up a little bit.
Yeah, I found myself, while at the stadium watching the game and at home rewatching it, wondering, how incredible Ohio State would be if Paris Johnson, Luke Whippler, and DeJuan Jones were still on this offensive line because I watching Joe Alt play for Notre Dame, who would have been a first round pick, in the NFL draft in March or April or May or whenever the hell they do that now. Um, and you're like, oh, he came back, and then you're like, yeah, being sure nice if Paris was out there helping. Even just one of those three guys would be a whole lot of help for Ohio State, and let alone all three of them, all of them having eligibility would have been nice. Speaking of
Yeah,
guys who I can't believe maybe I don't think Buckeyes fans would have ever imagined you'd miss as much as the defensive line is missing Zach Harrison. You know? Like
really.
he's yeah, like at least was that like Zach was always getting close to the quarterback. Like he was getting close and he's a good guy in run support. He did a nice job setting the edge. He was maybe never spectacular, but he did get to the quarterback and force some things sometimes, and he's got such long arms that he made plays. Um, I don't know what to make of the defensive end play on Saturday because I'm trying not to get too critical of it, knowing that they were facing Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, and I know those guys were good. The plan, watching the defense, to me looked like don't rush the passer. It looked like don't rush the passer.
Hmm. Um,
Or like
that's
they
interesting.
never it was 3 or 4 guys at most. Most of the time in obvious passing downs, the Buckeyes were only really rushing 3. And I couldn't believe it because like we knew going into the game, the whole thing about Hartman is if you give him time to pass, he's gonna be a problem. And it seemed like Ohio State was okay giving him time to pass because why?
I actually thought rewatching the game that JT had a decent game. Like he's just a power guy, so like it's tough, right? He's not going to bend the edge and like do a swim move on a guy and get around the corner. I just don't think that's his game. But there were a couple dropbacks where I thought he got the better of Joe Alt in terms of just like pushing him back into Sam Hartman, and actually got close a couple times. He was only credited with 3 pressures, and you want to see more than that. It was the other side, like Jack Sawyer against Blake Fisher, who I think is certainly a notch below Joe Alt, that I thought maybe Ohio State might be able to get a few wins in pass rush situations, and that didn't happen. They also didn't put Kenyatta Jackson or Caden Curry on the field really at all with trying to exploit that. It was Jack and JT the entire game.
Yeah.
Caden Curry played one snap. It was an interior rush on a rushman package, I think like early in the game, and Kenyatta didn't play at all. So they let those two guys play, and like, I don't think they were awful. Like, I don't think they
Yeah.
had bad games. They just kinda had games that were there,
They
and
had
they
games
didn't.
and they got worn down. And here's
Yeah.
here's the weird thing though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not like the football X's and O's scheme guy like you are. There's no rule that says what side of the line those guys have to be lined up on, right? I mean, you can move JT to the other side and let him go against the inferior tackle and maybe get big plays out of it. Because if my memory serves, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Um, the two plays that JT Tuimoloau made on Notre Dame's last offensive drive were when he was on the other side, and I don't remember him being there at all the rest of the game. And it looked to me like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like he whipped Blake Fisher pretty good on those two reps. So why not just move him at other times?
It's a I agree with you. I don't know. I don't wanna say like he was on the left side of their offensive line for every other snap, but it did feel like he was. I wasn't counting it up, but he was definitely on the right side against the right tackle on those 2 plays where, like, he suddenly showed up and made 2 really big, important, game-changing plays, a sack and a near interception,
Yeah.
where, yeah, he, like, ragdolled the line on the first play and then disengaged and showed great awareness to get in the area of the screenplay on the second one. So, I don't
Yeah,
know
it's not
why
like
they
the
have to
left
move.
tackle is a cornerback who's following you around on the field.
Yeah. I don't know because it's not a, yeah, you're not like, "Oh, we gotta put our best guy on their best offensive lineman."
I
It's like, that's not the
go
way it
ahead. You
works.
know what I would have tried to not put anybody over Joe Alt and just put
Yeah,
them
just
both
rush.
on the other side. Like,
Yeah.
who cares?
It's a good question. I don't know. It's something, I guess we're not going to talk to Jim Knowles this week. We're going to talk to him next week when they get prepared for the Maryland game 2 Saturdays from now. But I think that actually is a worthwhile question for Jim Knowles. Like, how do you decide which side of the line your ends are going to play on? Because as you pointed out, and countless others I think have pointed out since, it did seem like things changed a bit when JT got the rush to the right tackle.
Yeah. Defensive tackle Tyleek played another good game.
Yeah,
I thought Michael Hall, like early in the game, made his presence felt. Again, Notre Dame just wore them down in the second half, and we're not going to. There has to be another guy or two to step up to be ready to rotate in. I'm not saying you need to rotate them like crazy, but Tyleek can't play every snap. It's just
yeah,
not.
just steal a few snaps. Yeah,
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 it's clear. As good as he's been physically, I still don't think he's the guy that you can be like, well, he's in the condition to play every single snap, and we know we're going to get 100% effort from him on every play. But whatever.
or look this up
Linebackers.
though. I just want to look up Ty. So Tyleek leads them in snaps. Before I get to that, I'm waiting for it to load. Hero Canoe did play the fourth down play, the Cody Simon play. Ohio State
Mhm.
went like goal line package, and Hero Canoe was brought onto the field. They had 5 defensive linemen, uh, 3 linebackers, and 3 safeties on the field.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a corner on the field. And Hero Canoe came out there and was playing next to Ty Hamilton, I think.
Wait.
So I don't know,
Mike
like to put him in that
Hall had
spot.
four. Hall had 4 tackles. Hamilton had 4 tackles. Tyleek Williams had 4 tackles. So all those guys were busy and active and did a good job. JT had 6. I mean, Jack Sawyer was credited with 1 tackle in the game, and that's
Yeah.
not great. You
He
know,
almost had that interception on the first drive.
yeah, he could have had an INT. So did Tyleek Williams. 3 dropped defensive line interceptions by Ohio State. So
Pretty
good
wild.
job by the group. I'm going to give them like a B for the game, but let's work on them hands, boys. You know what I'm saying? Whole game,
Y
whole game changes. Linebacker, I've been very I've praised Tommy and Steele a lot for being in the right spot and being reliable. They were not that on Saturday. I don't know why. I'm trying to, again, watching the game, even watching it in slow motion, like I don't know where they're supposed to be, so I don't know
Right.
who's at fault. Um, hoping to get some sort of insight into that. I just thought they both were out physicaled, and Steele, as good as he's been in coverage all season long, looked lost. And I'm going to give the credit to Notre Dame for doing things that made that happen, but it was definitely not encouraging when you saw the confusion against the two back sets,
Yep.
because I think Michigan and Penn State can both capitalize on that sort of problem. And that's why it worries me down the road because I thought Cody Simon coming in, could have been a difference maker. He had two tackles, obviously the big one on the fourth down in the first part of the game, but I don't think he made the impact that he should have, that I would have thought he would make in this, run heavy game from Notre Dame. They did a good job. It seemed like Ohio State expecting Estime to get the ball, and then Notre Dame would give it to the second back, and they were a little quicker. Um, I just didn't think that the linebackers looked ready for what Notre Dame was going to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was the first time in a while where I felt like I saw the linebackers just kind of either getting covered up by linemen really quickly or getting caught in the wash a little bit and just not in position to make plays. And part of that is a defensive line conversation too. It's not merely on the linebackers, but it did feel like I don't know if it's over aggression or you're taught to go really sell out against the run or what, but I did feel like they were taking themselves out of plays against the run. And then there were a couple of completions in the pass game that were just throwing ball over the linebacker's head. Tommy and Steele on one play early kind of got crossed up on crossing routes, and like one guy was they didn't seem to know who was supposed to run with who, and ended up being a completion. So it was not their best game. They're both very good and have played well really for the last 2 years, like yeah, the year plus. So like I'm
Yeah.
not worried about them. I think it's just sometimes guys don't have their best nights, and this didn't feel like it, but it
My
did
worry
show up. Yeah,
My worry, as I said, is the two back sets and how they struggled with that, but also that it sort of reflects the problem that I think Tommy had against Georgia and that I think he's had against Michigan, where when a lineman, a good offensive line, gets to that second level, he has been sort of wiped out of these games. And I think that, it's good that Lathan was there and had 13 tackles and was able to come up and clean some stuff up where Tommy might have normally been. But I don't know if those are games where he's just being out physical or if it's because he's being out schemed or something else. But it seems like there's a recurring theme in the Michigan games, the Georgia games, and now this one where that offensive line. Generally, Ohio State doesn't play teams that have good offensive lines good enough to do that. These
rare.
teams
Yeah,
have been. These teams have good enough offensive lines to do that. So I don't think that you worry about that again until Michigan from that perspective. But because I don't think Penn State's offensive line's playing that well.
I agree.
Um, but like it's just on my radar. Like, hey, I don't know why those games he has been neutralized by an offensive lineman, and is that because the defensive tackles aren't doing their job? Is it a tackle coming and getting them because the defensive ends aren't doing their job? Is it when Ohio State is dropping the defensive ends and blitzing bringing the linebackers instead, and they're just running into it? It seems like my preference would be to have your middle linebacker All American candidate sitting in the middle, reading and reacting and making sure that 4-yard runs don't turn into 9-yard runs instead of the other way around.
Yep. Secondary.
Corners are good, man. They're good. I mean, Igbenogsen's a little aggressive. I think that we've had that same problem all year. I think he just wants to make a play really, really bad. We saw it on the touchdown by Rico Flores, where wasn't a great move. It was just a quick step, and all of a sudden Igbenogsen's on the ground. But at this point, it seems like teams are realizing we're not going to throw it on Denzel Burke's side. So Davison either needs to, dial it in a little bit, or Jordan Hancock needs to get more run on the outside corner because Sonny Styles should not come off the field. I don't care at what the circumstances.
Yeah. So Jordan Hancock ends up only playing one snap at corner. He played 14 in the slot, a couple other snaps at safety. Sonny played 44 snaps, so he played 44 of the 65 defensive snaps, which is not bad. But I like to see him out there all the time too, if you can. I'll
I
agree
just
with you.
don't
The
think in
corners
this
are
game,
excellent.
I just don't think in
Yeah.
this game, the matchups don't dictate that Sonny should be off the field. I don't think Ohio State should be letting their opponent dictate when the Buckeyes' best players are on the field. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
let's
th
start.
I think that's right, and they were doing that. They were definitely matching personnel, like when you could like when they were whenever there were 2 tight ends on the field, Sonny was out there, and then he was still out there sometimes against 11 personnel with 1 tight end. But I think Ohio State tried as often as it could. When it was 3 receivers, they put Jordan Hancock out there instead. Um,
Yeah. But if that third receiver is a 6'2", 235-pound Jaden Greathouse, I'd rather have Sonny Styles out there.
yeah, or just find a way to make it work with both of them, and we'll see if they get there. They did not. I don't believe the 2 of them have played together yet. And it's interesting to me that Jordan Hancock, like, is not playing outside. It's
Yeah.
just like it's Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun, which like they're both played great, and I think Denzel's awesome. But I thought we would have seen more outside corner work for Jordan Hancock than we've seen so far. But they all played good in this game, I thought.
And safeties, I mean, I'll include Sonny into that conversation, but obviously, Proctor, I think, played fairly well. I don't, he's a guy that, like, when I'm talking about Davis and Igbinosun and like dialing it back a little bit, you can see that Josh Proctor is doing that on
Mhm.
purpose. Like
Yep.
he is reeling it in. And Lathan Ransom has proven, time and time again to be one of the better in the box safeties in the country. And the Buckeyes have done a nice job keeping him at depth in the passing game where you're not getting beat. So I don't have anything but high marks for the secondary. I thought, Notre Dame was averaging 46 yards or 46 points a game coming into this game. They got held to 14. And overall, I'm not going to complain about the defense at all. I do have some concerns about good offensive linemen and what they're doing to the linebackers. I do have some concern, I guess, about the lack of a third defensive ends and a fourth defensive tackle emerging. I don't think you need to rotate excessively, but you do need to have someone else who can just stay fresh. And I think the Buckeyes could have used Caden Curry or Kenyatta Jackson more in this game, or the jack position, which I can't believe doesn't exist. Um,
Yeah.
but overall, the defense, they've given up 34 points in 4 games. That's as good as I can remember in my lifetime. They're going to get tested against Maryland, who's scored close to 50 points on them twice in the last 4 years. So they're going to get tested, and I hope that they use this time to get some breaks. Let me ask I have a trivia question for you, Bill. If Ohio State wins the rest of its games 17-14, what happens?
The rest of its games are going to go to the playoff.
And then what if they win those games 17-14?
Then they'll hold a big trophy at the end.
Yeah. So I think it's worth it, right? Like, I think it's okay. So it's trying to rewire the brain to say it's okay to win this way sometimes. And
Yeah.
I implore the more modern Ohio State fan to look back at the 2014 season, refresh yourself on how that year actually went in the games in October and November. Go back to the 2002 season, refresh yourself on the scores of those games at Northwestern, at Illinois. Like this was not a season where Ohio State was dominant all year round. There's no game that they played in those seasons that is as big as the win they got on Saturday. You could argue the Penn State game in 2014 had a similar emotional range to it, I guess, but that Penn State team was not very good when it came down to it. This Notre Dame team, provided if they can take care of business against USC, they're going to probably finish 11-1 or 10-2 at worst. So, like, it's a pretty good team.
I think it is good to show that you have the traits to win a game like that, even when it doesn't look pretty. I think there are some things to figure out with this offense and like exactly what it's going to be, and maybe it's probably not going to be as productive as we've seen in 40-point barrages every week. But I don't know that they need to be that with the way that this defense plays, and I think this defense is very good. I thought they played I don't want to say great game against Notre Dame because obviously Notre Dame drove it a little bit, but I thought it was a very good game for Ohio State's defense, and I think they did the thing that was most important in that game, which was not letting Notre Dame hit explosive plays, and like they didn't really happen. They didn't get beat over the top really at one time in that game, and Notre Dame was trying to lull them into it, and it never hit. And I think because of that, they were to keep them off the scoreboard enough for Ohio State to win. The secondary was a huge part of that too, so I have high marks for the secondary as well. Um, and I believe in this defense, man. I'd like to see, like you said, a little more on the defensive line, just making sure that Tyleek and Mike and JT like can remain fresh throughout the entire year. But otherwise, I think it's a really good defense.
Yeah, and on offense, you just have to finish. I mean, that's really what this game came down to. You have a goal line stand where you don't score. You turn the ball over on downs again at the 11-yard line. You drop a touchdown that leads to a field. Like, this game feels a whole lot different if you score 3 touchdowns in those spots and it's 31-14 or 28-14, and you're not having these struggles or these questions. But this is why Ryan Day has to react the way he did after the game. Like, you got to take your victories when you can get them. And maybe to some people on the outside, it seems weird to celebrate the way that Day did post game and the things he said because of 1 yard where they 1 yard touchdown run. They were only got it by 2 inches. I don't care. Like, Ryan Day needs to show his team, I'm going to celebrate these wins. And
Mhm.
I think that for Ohio State fans in general, like, you just have to accept that every year is going to be different. And the best thing about this season is that for the first time in a few years, there appears to be a defense good enough to let the offense catch up and to let the offense figure itself out and to work out the kinks and to get more efficient. Because when that happens, we will see those 40-point games again that you're expecting. I mentioned this to Austin on Snap Judgments, and I'd like your thought on it before we wrap.
Mhm.
Last year, Ohio State was playing better than anybody in the country in the first 6 weeks of the year going into the off week. And we were like, hey, this is easy. This team's coasting. They came out of the off week, and it was a totally dysfunctional, different team. I am much more optimistic heading I think there's a much better or more likely to happen that they come out of this off week moving up than going down.
I do agree with that. I think it is good at this point in the season to have tangible things that you need to improve on, and Ohio State certainly has them. And it's hard to maintain an upward trajectory for the entirety of 12 games. Teams have done it, like you can do it. Like we've seen some real juggernauts do it. I think. Um, this feels more like natural to me to like be a team that's still figuring some stuff out. You grind out a win that was tough that people frankly didn't think you're going to be able to do it. Now you get to recalibrate in an off week and work on some of those things, get a little bit of rest and come out on the other end of it. I think in a better spot and then ramp up again to the Penn State and ramp up again to Michigan. So I'm
Yep.
with you. I think it's a good observation.
We're gonna try to get some rest this week on our off week. Maybe not have as much content as normal, but we're still gonna do a lot of the things we always do before we ramp back up, next week. But I think that's a good spot to wrap this episode of the podcast daily, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. We'll have no Ryan Day press conference on this Tuesday because of the off week. So don't look for that. Don't look for snap judgments. Doug and I will have Kings of the North later on Tuesday. Move that back from Monday, but I think that's probably it for as far as Tuesday goes. And we'll have some more stuff throughout the week. Right, we're not going to totally
Yeah.
abandon you
You guys
guys,
will have
but
snap judgments on Wednesday. I
on
mean,
Wednesday,
there'll be other stuff
yeah,
going on, but
yeah.
it will be we're gonna do our best to take advantage of the off week as well. Because I don't know if you folks have noticed, but we're doing a lot of video.
We sure are. So let's end this one.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast daily for Berm. I'm Bill. We'll talk to you guys later.